The city was dying. Elias Kane stood alone in the middle of the marketplace, where silence had swallowed everything that once breathed with life. The stalls that once spilled over with fruit and fabric now stood broken, their metal frames bent like old bones. The streets were wide but empty, cracked with dust that the wind carried through the air. Somewhere far above, the sky was stained red, as if even the heavens had begun to bleed. Elias had been here many times before, yet tonight felt different. His boots crunched against shattered glass as he moved, and every sound echoed like a warning. The colony was collapsing under its own weight. Years of neglect, wars fought in shadows, leaders who promised hope but delivered nothing. Now it was just ruins, a playground for soldiers and scavengers. He adjusted the strap of his coat and kept walking, scanning the edges of the marketplace. He wasn't searching for anything in particular, at least not until it happened. A blur. A sudden rush of motion broke the stillness. Elias turned sharply, his instincts honed from years of service in the outer colonies. And then he saw her. A girl. She was small, no older than 12 by the looks of her, but everything about her was strange. Her skin carried a faint, otherworldly glow, like moonlight caught beneath the surface. Her eyes shimmered with a pale silver light, wide with panic, and her breaths came out in quick bursts. She wasn't human. Elias knew at the instant their eyes locked. The alien girl looked at him as if she had found something she had been searching for all along. Without a word, she stumbled forward. Her steps were clumsy, almost desperate, and before Elias could move or even question her, she rushed straight to him. Then, without warning, she had behind his back. Elias froze. He felt her trembling, her small hands clutching the back of his coat, the way a frightened child clings to a parent. His hand instinctively reached for the holster at his side, but he stopped himself. She wasn't attacking. She wasn't threatening. She was just afraid. And then he heard it, the sound of boots. Heavy, sharp, synchronized. Soldiers. From the far end of the market, a group of men in black armor appeared, moving with cold precision. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, their weapons held tight, glowing faintly with the energy of charged rounds. They were hunters, and they were hunting her. "Step aside," one of them barked, his voice cold to the filter of his helmet. "That girl is coming with us." Elias didn't answer right away. He glanced back at her. She pressed closer, trembling harder, her head buried against his back as though his body were the only shield she trusted. His jaw tightened. "What has she done?" Elias asked. His voice was calm, steady, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. The soldier raised his weapon slightly, its aim not directly at Elias, but close enough to remind him of the danger. "She's a fugitive. Classified threat. Hand her over, and you won't be harmed." Elias almost laughed, though there was nothing funny about the situation. The girl behind him couldn't even stand straight without shaking, and these armored men were calling her a threat? He narrowed his eyes, his soldier's instinct whispering to him that something wasn't right. "She doesn't look like much of a threat to me," Elias said flatly. "She isn't what she seems," the soldier replied, his voice colder now. "Step aside." The girl's grip on his coat tightened, and that was all Elias needed. He wasn't the kind of man who could turn away when someone clung to him for help. Not after everything he had seen, not after all the battles he had fought, and all the lives he had lost. Humans had a strange way of standing up for others, even when it made no sense. And right now, this wasn't about logic. It was about instinct. "I think I'll hold on to her for now," Elias said, his voice firm. The soldiers stiffened. One of them muttered something under his breath, words Elias couldn't catch. For a moment, it looked like they might open fire right there, but then their leader raised his hand. The group stopped. The leader's visor glowed faintly as he stared at Elias. "You're making a mistake," he said slowly. "You don't understand what she carries." "Then explain," Elias replied. Silence. The soldiers gave no answer, no reason, only the cold glare of helmets and the hum of their weapons. Then, as quickly as they had arrived, they began to back away. Their leader gave a sharp gesture, and within seconds, the group disappeared into the shadows of the broken streets. Elias didn't relax. He knew this wasn't over. They would be back. And when they came, It wouldn't just be a handful of men. They'd return with reinforcements, and they wouldn't leave without her. Slowly, Elias turned to face the girl. She was staring at him now, her eyes wide and wet with tears. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He could see the fear written all over her, but there was something else too, something deeper. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, a strange sensation filled his mind. A voice, not a sound exactly, but a whisper that echoed inside him. "Help!" Elias blinked, his breath catching. She hadn't spoken aloud. She had spoken into his thoughts. Her eyes locked onto his, pleading, fragile, desperate. And just like that, Elias understood one thing with perfect clarity. This girl was not just running from something. She had run to him. He looked around the marketplace again, his soldiers' instinct scanning every corner for danger. The soldiers were gone, but their presence lingered like smoke. The air was heavy, too quiet, too still. He turned back to her. She was still trembling, but there was a strange spark in her eyes now. Hope, fragile but alive. Elias let out a slow breath. "All right," he said softly, almost himself. "Looks like you're with me now." The girl's grip on his coat loosened slightly, as if his words had given her the smallest piece of safety. But Elias knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The night seemed heavier after the soldiers left. The air carried that strange silence which always followed danger, like the world itself was holding its breath. Elias didn't move right away. He stood still, his eyes fixed on the broken streets where the armored men had disappeared, listening for the sound of boots returning. But there was nothing, just a distant hum of wind scraping across glass and metal. Slowly, he turned his attention back to the girl. She was still close, too close, as if letting go of his coat would mean losing whatever safety she had found. Her glowing eyes blinked up at him, and Elias studied her in the dim red light of the sky. She looked small, fragile even, but there was something hidden in the way she carried herself. Fear wasn't her only companion. There was also determination, though it was buried beneath layers of exhaustion. "Come on," Elias said at last, his voice steady but low. "We can't stay out here." The girl didn't answer with words, but she followed him, her steps quick and quiet as she stayed close to his side. Elias walked to the remains of the market, weaving between broken stalls and fallen beams, his mind already working through the possibilities. Those soldiers hadn't given up. No, men like that never gave up. They would be back, and they would bring more with them. That meant Elias had a choice to make, and it wasn't going to be simple. When they reached a narrow alley, Elias stopped and glanced down at her. "You understand me, don't you?" Her silver eyes met his. She gave a small nod. "Good," Elias muttered, "because I need to know what I'm dealing with. Who are you? Why are they after you?" For a moment, he thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, just as before, her voice brushed against his mind, not spoken aloud, but whispered straight into his thoughts. "They want to use me." Elias stiffened slightly. The voice was soft, but it was filled with fear and something deeper, grief, maybe, or guilt. "Use you for what?" he asked carefully. Her gaze dropped to the ground. "I carry something they need. If they take it, many will suffer." Elias frowned. That wasn't much of an answer, but it was enough to tell him that this girl wasn't just some runaway child. She carried a secret, something big enough to have soldiers scouring the colony for her. He rubbed a hand across his jaw, thinking. He had been a soldier himself once, long ago, and he knew the kind of orders those armored men lived by. They didn't chase after children for no reason. If they were hunting her this hard, it meant she was dangerous to them, or valuable. And valuable was sometimes worse than dangerous. The girl tugged lightly at his sleeve, pulling his thoughts back to the present. Her eyes met his again, shining in the dark alley. "Will you help me?" Elias let out a slow breath. That question carried a weight he didn't want, but he couldn't ignore it either. She had chosen him, for reasons he didn't yet understand, and something in her trembling voice stirred something deep inside him. He remembered battles where men had begged for help, remembered the faces of those he couldn't save. This time, he couldn't just turn away. "I'll help you," he said finally, "but you need to trust me. Do you understand?" The girl nodded quickly, almost desperately. Elias led her deeper into the alley, away from the main streets. He knew a place, a safe house of sorts, an old storage unit beneath the bones of the city. It wasn't much, but it would give them cover for the night. They moved quickly, slipping through shadows, careful not to draw attention. Along the way, Elias studied her more closely. Her steps were quiet, but she was limping slightly. He slowed his pace. "You're hurt," he said. She shook her head, as if denying it, but he caught the way she winced when she walked. Without a word, he crouched down in front of her. "Get on." Her eyes widened. "You'll slow us down if you keep limping." "Get on," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. After a moment of hesitation, she climbed onto his back. She was lighter than he expected, her arms wrapping tightly around his shoulders. For a brief moment, Elias felt the warmth of her trust, fragile but real. He carried her through the twisting alleys, his boots crunching softly against gravel, until finally they reached the old storage unit. Inside, the air was cold and stale, but it was shelter. Elias set her down gently on an old crate and lit a small lantern. The faint glow spread across the room, revealing piles of broken equipment and dust-covered walls. It wasn't much, but it was safe. The girl sat quietly, her glowing eyes following his every movement. Elias leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "You need to tell me more," he said. "If I'm going to protect you, I need to know what I'm up against." She hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. Then once again, her voice touched his mind. "I am the last of my kind. They destroyed the others. My family, my people, all gone." Elias felt his chest tighten. He had seen war, had seen destruction, but to hear it spoken so simply, so quietly, by someone so young, it was crushing. "They want what is inside me," she continued. "A code. My people gave it to me to protect. If they take it, they will use it for war. Many will die." Elias stared at her, silent for a long moment. The weight of her words pressed down on him. She wasn't just a frightened child. She was carrying the last hope of an entire species. "And why me?" he asked quietly. "Why did you run to me?" Her eyes softened, and her voice in his mind grew even quieter. "Because you are human, and humans can choose." Elias blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of her answer. "Humans can choose." The words echoed in his chest, stirring something he couldn't quite explain. Before he could reply, a sound echoed from outside, the crunch of boots, the faint hum of weapons charging. Elias instantly moved a lantern and blew it out, plunging the room into darkness. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The girl's small hand found his, gripping tightly. Together, they listened as shadows moved outside the storage unit, soldiers sweeping the streets again. Elias tightened his grip on her hand, his mind sharp and ready. The soldiers hadn't given up, and now they were closer than ever. This was just the beginning. The night stretched on, but Elias barely felt the hours passing. He sat in the dark storage room with the girl beside him, both listening to every noise outside. The sound of boots had faded after a while, but Elias knew better than to relax. Men like those soldiers didn't vanish for long. They were hunters. If they had lost her once, they would return stronger, more determined. The girl leaned against the crate, her eyes dimmer now, no longer glowing as bright as before. Exhaustion weighed on her, but she fought to stay awake, as if sleep itself might betray her. Elias watched her silently. Her face looked too young to carry the kind of fear she held inside, too soft to endure the loss she had whispered about. Finally, when the silence stretched too long, Elias spoke. "Tell me more about this code you're carrying. What does it mean?" Her voice didn't come out of her mouth. It slipped into his mind again, soft and fragile. "It is life and death. It can rebuild what was lost. But in the wrong hands, it will destroy even more." Elias frowned, trying to piece her words together. "So they want to use it as a weapon?" She nodded slowly, her silver eyes glistening in the dark. "Yes, my people made it to heal, not to harm. But humans and others, they only see power." The word humans caught him off guard. He shifted, his voice low. "And you still trust me?" Her gaze didn't waver. Yes, because you chose to protect me when you didn't have to. Elias went quiet. He wasn't sure what to say. Her trust weighed heavier than any weapon, heavier than any mission he had ever carried. He had lived through wars where trust was the first casualty, where betrayal came quicker than breath. And now here was this child, this alien girl, placing her last hope on him. He looked down at his hands, scarred from years of battles, and wondered why fate had chosen him. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even a soldier anymore. But the girl believed he was enough. And maybe that was what mattered. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying faint voices. Elias's instincts sharpened instantly. He stood and motioned for her to stay low. He crept toward the crack in the door and peered out. Shadows moved across the alley, and for a moment he caught the faint red glow of scanners sweeping the walls. They were searching again. Elias closed the door gently and turned back to her. They're close. We can't stay here much longer. The girl looked up at him, her voice brushing into his mind. Where will we go? He thought quickly. The city was falling apart, but there were still places, hidden places, where soldiers rarely ventured. Underground tunnels, old resistance hideouts, forgotten corners of the colony. He could take her there, at least for now. But the real question was, how far was he willing to go? As he packed what little gear he had, she spoke again, her voice softer this time. You wonder why I chose you. Elias glanced at her, surprised. I suppose it do. She lowered her head, her silver hair falling into her face. When I saw you, I felt something. My people, they believe humans carried a strength no other race could. Not in their weapons, not in their numbers, but in their hearts. You fight even when you cannot win. You protect even when you have nothing left. That is why I hid behind you. I knew you would choose me. Elias froze. Her words hit something deep inside him, something he hadn't touched in years. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at humanity with hope. Most of the galaxy saw humans as reckless, stubborn, too eager to fight battles that weren't theirs. But here was this girl, believing in him more than he believed in himself. Before he could respond, a sudden noise broke through the night, a loud crash, followed by shouts. Elias's heart kicked into gear. They had found the storage unit. Move, he hissed, grabbing her hand. Together, they slipped out the back, into the maze of alleys. The girl's small feet scrambled to keep up, but Elias kept her close, his grip firm as he led her through the shadows. Behind them, heavy boots thundered, lights swept the walls, beams cutting through the darkness. The soldiers were faster this time, more organized. Elias's breath came hard, his mind running through routes, exits, strategies. They darted through a narrow passage, ducked beneath a collapsed beam, and climbed over rubble. The girl stumbled once, nearly falling, but Elias caught her arm and pulled her back up. He didn't let go again. Finally, they slipped into another alley, and Elias pushed her against the wall, motioning for silence. They pressed in the shadows as a patrol passed by, their armored forms casting long shadows under the red-stained sky. The girl's hand clutched his tightly, her trembling body pressed close to his. Elias didn't breathe until the soldiers moved on. When the danger passed, Elias crouched down to meet her eyes. You have to tell me everything. I need to know exactly what they want from you. Her eyes shimmered in the dark, filled with a sadness deeper than words. They want the key inside me. It is hidden in my blood. My people created it to heal worlds, restore life where death had taken it. But those soldiers, they serve men who will twist it into something else. If they succeed, entire planets will burn. Elias felt his chest tighten. He had seen war up close. He knew what weapons could do. But this was worse. This wasn't just a weapon. It was hope itself, stolen and corrupted. And you're the only one who carries it? He asked. She nodded. I am the last. Her voice cracked inside his mind, breaking into pieces. Elias didn't need to hear more. He saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't just a frightened child. She was the last guardian of something that could change everything. And she had chosen him. He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and steady. Then we'll protect it. Together. The girl's eyes softened, and for the first time, he saw something other than fear in her expression. He saw trust. But the moment was cut short by the distant sound of engines. Elias stiffened. Dropships. They were bringing reinforcements. He looked back at her, his mind racing. They couldn't run forever. At some point, they would have to fight. And when that moment came, he would have to decide just how much of himself he was willing to risk for her secret. The girl gripped his hand again, her voice trembling inside his thoughts. They will not stop. Not until I am gone. Elias looked out into the ruined streets, his jaw tight, his eyes hard. Then we make sure you're never gone. Not while I'm still breathing. The engines grew louder, and the red sky above seemed to bleed deeper. The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The sound of engines shook the night. Elias pressed the girl against the wall, his body shielding hers as he looked up at the bleeding red sky. Dark shapes moved overhead, dropships, their engines humming low and steady, like predators circling the ruins. Bright beams of light scanned the streets, cutting through the darkness. The girl's hand trembled in his. Her voice brushed softly against his mind. They are closing in. Elias's jaw tightened. He had expected this. He knew they wouldn't stop with patrols. But seeing the dropships above made the truth heavy. It wasn't just a hunt anymore. It was war, and the girl was a prize. He pulled her closer and moved quickly through the narrow alleys, his boots landing softly on broken stone. Every corner they turned seemed more dangerous than the last. Soldiers were everywhere now, spreading out, weapons ready. He led her through side passages he remembered from years before, tunnels once used by rebels, routes the enemy might not know. But he knew it was only a matter of time before those paths were discovered too. The girl stumbled, but Elias caught her before she fell. She looked up at him, her eyes shining faintly, exhaustion clear on her face. You should leave me, her voice whispered in his thoughts. If they take me, they will stop chasing you. Elias stopped in his tracks. He looked at her, really looked at her, small, fragile, afraid, yet carrying the weight of an entire people. His voice came low, steady but sharp with conviction. Listen to me. I don't abandon those who trust me. If they want you, they'll have to go through me first. Her silver eyes shimmered with something he couldn't quite name. Hope, gratitude, something pure. She said nothing, but her small hand tightened around his. They pressed on, moving deeper into the city's ruins until they reached an open square. Elias stopped. Soldiers were already there, waiting, their black armor gleaming under the red sky. Dozens of them, their weapons raised. At their center stood the leader, visor glowing faintly. The soldier's voice echoed across the square. You've made this harder than it needed to be. Hand over the girl. Walk away. Live. Elias stepped forward, placing himself between them and the girl. His voice was calm, but filled with steel. She's not yours to take. The leader tilted his head slightly, almost amused. You don't understand what she carries. That code in her blood could end millions of lives. We're the only ones who can control it. I've heard enough. Elias cut him off. All I see are soldiers hunting a child. That's all I need to know. The soldier raised a hand, and the troops closed in. The girl's voice echoed in Elias's mind, trembling with fear. We cannot fight them all. Elias glanced back at her, his eyes sharp, his voice steady. Then we don't fight them alone. He reached for her hand, and the moment their skin touched, something changed. A surge of warmth shot through him, not like anything he had ever felt. His chest tightened, his mind filled with light. The girl gasped softly, her silver eyes glowing brighter, flooding with energy. Their connection deepened. He felt her fear, her sorrow, her hope, all of it flowing into him. And in return, he gave her his strength, his resolve, the unshakable human that had carried him through battles no one thought he'd survive. The soldiers charged. Blasts of energy streaked through the air, shattering stone, burning holes into the ground. But Elias moved with a speed he hadn't known he still carried. The girl's power coursed through him, sharpening his reflexes, strengthening his body. He blocked, dodged, struck with precision. Together, they fought like one. She guided him with visions, showing him where attacks would come before they landed. He shielded her with his body, striking down soldiers with strength that felt beyond human. Light burst from her hands, weaving around him, turning into a shield that deflected blasts. The square became chaos. Soldiers shouted, their formations breaking as Elias cut through them, his movements fueled by more than muscle, fueled by the bond they shared. For every strike he made, the girl's power answered, amplifying him, lifting him beyond what he thought possible. But the enemy was endless. For every soldier that fell, two more seemed to appear. Elias's chest burned, his arms heavy, his breath ragged. Still, he refused to stop. The girl clung to him, her energy pouring into him, her eyes glowing brighter and brighter. Finally, the leader stepped forward. His weapon blazed with a heat that lit the square. He aimed directly at the girl. Elias moved instantly, pulling her behind him. The blast struck his side, sending him crashing against the rubble. Pain tore through him, but he forced himself back up. He wouldn't let her go. Not now. Not ever. The girl dropped to her knees beside him, her glowing hands pressed against his wound. Light spread from her touch, numbing the pain, knitting flesh back together. Elias groaned but stayed on his feet, his eyes locked on the leader. "You can't win," the soldier said coldly. "She belongs to us." Elias spat blood and stepped forward, his voice carrying across the square. "No, she belongs to no one, not while I'm here." The leader raised his weapon again, but before he could fire, the girl's glow exploded. A wave of light burst from her body, sweeping across the square like a storm. Soldiers stumbled blinded, their weapons shorting out. The leader staggered, his visor cracking under the force. The girl's voice filled Elias's mind, stronger than ever. "They will not stop, not until I am gone. But if I fall, they will never get what they seek. I can end this, but it will cost me everything." Elias's heart froze. He looked at her, his voice breaking with urgency. "No, don't say that. We'll find another way. You hear me? You're not alone anymore." Her eyes shimmered, tears glowing like silver stars. "My people gave their lives to protect me. Now I must give mine to protect this secret. But I am not afraid, because you show me what it means to be human." Elias shook his head, gripping her shoulders. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to die for them. Let me carry this. Let me fight." Her small hands rose to his face, glowing softly as she whispered into his mind. "You already carry it. You carry me. That is enough." The square filled with silence as her glow grew brighter, blinding, overwhelming. The soldiers fell back, their voices panicked. The leader raised his weapon, shouting orders, but it was too late. The girl's power surged outward, a storm of light and sorrow. Elias held her tightly, refusing to let go, even as the light consumed everything. He felt her heartbeat against his chest, steady at first, then fading. He whispered her name, though he had never known it. He begged her to stay, but she only smiled faintly, her silver eyes dimming. When the light finally faded, the square was empty. The soldiers were gone, scattered by the force. The leader's weapon lay broken, smoking on the ground, and Elias stood alone, the girl limb in his arms. His chest ached, not from his wounds, but from the truth. She had given everything, and he had been powerless to stop her. He sank to his knees, holding her close, his breath shaking. Her secret was safe, but the cost had broken his heart. The red sky above bled deeper, as if mourning with him. The light had gone. The battlefield was silent now, broken only by the soft crackle of smoke rising from shattered stone. The soldiers had scattered or fallen, their weapons lying useless in the dust. The red-stained sky above had begun to fade into a darker shade, like the world itself was grieving. Elias knelt on the ground, cradling the girl in his arms. She felt impossibly light, her small frame pressed against his chest, her silver eyes dim, fading with every breath. His hands shook as he held her, his voice a low whisper. "Stay with me, please. You're not done yet. You don't have to go." Her lips trembled, curving into the faintest of smiles. Her voice filled his mind one last time, weaker now, like a candle's flame flickering in the wind. "I am not afraid. You showed me what it means to be safe. what it means to be seen. Elias's throat tightened. His vision blurred as he tried to hold her closer, as if his arms alone could keep her anchored to life. He had lost comrades before, had watched friends fall on battlefields. But this was different. This wasn't a soldier. This wasn't someone prepared for war. This was a child who had carried too much, who had trusted him with everything. He shook his head, his voice cracking. You shouldn't have had to carry this alone. You deserve better. You deserve to live. Her silver eyes fluttered half shut. You will live, and through you, so will I. Her glow faded slowly, until only a faint warmth lingered in his arms. Elias sat in silence, his body trembling, his heart heavier than it had ever been. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. All he could do was hold her, as if letting go would mean betraying the promise he had made. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed in the ruins of the square. When the wind shifted, carrying the last traces of smoke away, Elias finally stood. His body ached from the battle, his wounds raw and burning, but the greater pain came from the hollow ache in his chest. He looked down at the girl, her face peaceful now, free from fear. Gently, he wrapped her in his coat, lifting her carefully. His steps were slow, steady, as he carried her away from the square. The city was silent. The soldiers were gone. The dropships vanished. Only ruins remained, and in those ruins, Elias walked with his burden, each step a reminder of the weight he would carry forever. He found an old courtyard, broken by time but still touched by traces of beauty. A single tree grew there, its twisted branches reaching toward the sky, stubbornly alive despite everything. Beneath that tree, Elias laid her down. He knelt beside her, smoothing the fabric of his coat over her small frame, and bowed his head. You deserve more than this, he whispered. But I'll carry your secret. I'll make sure no one ever twists what you protected. I swear it. The words broke inside him, but he spoke them anyway. They weren't just a promise to her. They were a promise to himself. For a long while, he sat there in silence, the tree's branches swaying gently above him, the wind whispering through the ruins. He felt her presence still, faint, fragile, but there, not in her body, not in her glow, but in his memory. She had given everything, and in return, left him with something no soldier had ever carried before: hope. When the sky finally shifted from red to dark, Elias rose. His body was heavy, his heart heavier still, but his resolve had never been stronger. He adjusted the straps of his gear, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He wasn't just a wanderer anymore. He wasn't just another man in the ruins. He was the keeper of her secret, the bearer of her trust. And though the galaxy might never know her name, he would remember. He would make sure her sacrifice was not in vain. As he left the courtyard, her voice whispered faintly in his mind, softer than a breath. Thank you for choosing me. Elias stopped, his chest tightening, his eyes burning. He let the silence answer for him, because words would never be enough. He walked on. The city stretched out before him, broken and bleeding, but somewhere beyond it lay the wider galaxy, a galaxy where a code still lived, hidden within him, waiting for a time when it could heal instead of harm. Elias didn't know how long he could keep it safe, or what battles awaited him, but he knew one thing with certainty. He would not stop, because she had believed in him, because she had given him everything, because he was human, and humans, for all their flaws, never stopped fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The ruin swallowed his footsteps as he disappeared into the night. The girl was gone, but her secret, her hope, her memory, those would live on. Not in soldiers, not in weapons, but in him. And maybe one day that would be enough to change everything.